happy that you're here because I'm about to show you what the differences are between acoustic and electric guitar. I mean, of course there are differences in terms of sound. I mean, this is kind of obvious, but when you play something like this, this is kind of like a typical electric guitar sound, a rock sound, which you can make on a guitar like this. And on this beauty, you can make something like this. This is a classical guitar, an acoustic guitar, and we have this baby here, which is a steel string acoustic guitar. And also, it's an acoustic guitar, but it sounds so different. And so all those three different guitars here have their own personality in terms of sound. But to me it's important for this video to show you the differences in terms of feel and what happens to your chords when you play them on the one or the other. And I would say that those two friends over here are, to me in a certain way, in terms of feel, closer together than they are to that one here, the classical guitar. Because I mean, the neck shapes are kind of similar. It's a pretty thin necks. They are not that wide. I mean, the electric guitar neck is even thinner than the one from the steel string acoustic guitar. And one of the main differences here is that we have lighter strings on the electric guitar, usually. I mean, there are some people out there that put pretty heavy strings on their electric guitars too. But if you take the strings that come most of the time from the factories where these guitars are built, you have pretty light strings on them. And this makes it a little bit easier to play your usual chords and stuff. And on acoustic guitars, there are mostly heavier strings on them. I mean, if you play just a basic chord, like a C major chord or something like this, I mean, this feels kind of the same when you play it on this acoustic guitar here. I mean, of course, the sound is different. We talked about this before, but the neck is a little bit wider, but the main difference are the strings. You have to push harder here on this guitar to get a decent sound out of it. And on the one hand, that makes it more difficult to play on it, but on the other hand, this has, for example, the advantage to me that it stays better in tune than when you have an electric guitar which has really light strings on it, for example. And for a bloody beginner, it might be easier to start on an electric guitar because the strings are a little bit lighter. But to me, you get used to that after a while. But just to make sure you know the differences when you pick the guitars up, there are differences. I mean, the way you play your chords are pretty similar when you go from a steel string acoustic to an electric guitar. The shapes are the same anyways, but the way how you grab the neck and stuff, it's quite similar actually, but you have to build up a little bit more pressure because of the strings. But if you're going for a classical guitar here, which has this really mellow and warm sound, you often have a really wide neck. That might be an issue for people with really small hands in the beginning, for example, because your fingers have to stretch more, and it might be tough for you if you try to grab your chords that you're used to play on your electric or your steel string acoustic, because the shapes feel a little bit different. The whole thing that's going on within your hand feels a little bit different, I must say. But on the other hand, the strings on a classical guitar are pretty soft. You don't need as much pressure than you need on the steel string acoustic, for example, and that makes it easier again on the other side. So if you go for a certain sound and you say, I want this kind of AC/DC rock sound, go for an electric guitar. If you're not that sure and you say, I don't know, I mean, just take a listen, what kind of sounds those guitars create, and go for that one that you like the most, because I think you can get used to everything in terms of how much pressure you have to build and stuff. But I must say, in a certain way, those chords on a classical guitar are a little bit easier to grab in the beginning. If you're open to all kinds of sounds, go for it, but don't blame me if you want to play Wonderwall and it sounds like this. I mean, you get the idea. It's just not the sound. Of course, it might be easier to grab those chords than to grab those chords on these two, but go for it and check it out. One other thing is, of course, electricity going through your guitar. Most of those classical guitars don't need to be amplified. I mean, they can have pickups in them too to make them sound louder and stuff. But to me, pickups in acoustic guitars, I don't know, they don't come close to what you hear when you're just playing it. The natural sound of an acoustic guitar is hard to match with a pickup, to me. I mean, of course, there are microphones that you can use and put in front of them, but especially when you're in a live situation, to me, this is a difficult thing. And all the pickup systems which are used in acoustic guitars, of course they work and they sound good too, don't get me wrong, but to me the most beauty comes from an acoustic guitar just sounding acoustic. That's the thing. If you're an electric guitar player, as I said before, it can be easier in a certain way because you have this tiny small neck here and those really light strings. It can be a problem when you play those kind of rock sounds like this, that this distortion and overdrive on your signal when you play with that rocky sound, that might bring you into some trouble when you play your chords and stuff, because there's sometimes mistakes that you make are even louder because the distortion amplifies everything that you do on your guitar. If you, for example, play something here, you want to play your blues licks, and you accidentally hit one string that you don't want to hit, and fret buzz is even amplified by the sound you might use. I mean, there comes one of the other things that you have to keep in mind when you change from an acoustic to an electric guitar. There's an amplifier that you have to work on too. A lot of beginners struggle with setting up their amplifier in a correct way, and this is an issue when you think, oh, this is so hard to play to get a good sound of my electric guitar. It might be the amp that's not set up right, that you have too much gain on it and that you have too many bass frequencies dialed in there or whatever. There are a lot of options and things that can go wrong when using an amplifier in terms of sound, and that makes you feel uncomfortable with the things you can already play or you thought you can already play on your acoustic guitar. So I hope I could bring some light into the differences between three different kinds of guitars. And if you want to start out with my free lessons, if you're a bleeding beginner, check my free lessons in the video description, totally free, and also there you will find a completely free ebook, no subscription or something like this at all. You just grab that ebook from the download link and there you go, starting out in the world of guitar playing. And we see us in the next video. Take care, guys. Bye.